Ethan sat in the silence of their living room, a space curated not for comfort, but for display. Every surface gleamed under the soft, recessed lighting. Every object was a statement. It was Clara's masterpiece, a testament to her exquisite and expensive taste. He waited. The late afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, striping the cool marble floor with bars of gold. In his hand, he held a single, folded sheet of paper from his doctor's office. The words on it were clinical, cold, but their implication was a fire that could either forge or shatter a life. He had read them a dozen times. Now, he knew them by heart. He heard the soft click of the front door, followed by the musical jingle of keys being dropped into a porcelain bowl. Clara. She swept into the room, a whirlwind of cashmere and expensive perfume, her face flushed from a day of what she called essential errands, a circuit of boutique shopping and long lunches. "Ethan? Why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked, her voice a light, melodic thing. She flicked a switch, and another layer of engineered light flooded the room, washing out the natural gold of the sun. He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at her, this beautiful, polished woman he had married. He had once believed her polish was depth. He had been wrong. He watched her as she set down her shopping bags, the logos of which were a language of their own, a dialect of pure wealth. "Clara, we need to talk," he said. His voice was steady, calm. It was the voice he used with contractors and city planning committees, a voice that conveyed quiet authority. She sighed, a small, put-upon sound. "Can it wait, darling? I've had the most exhausting day, and we have your family's dreadful dinner party tonight." Her family, not his. She'd made that subtle correction years ago. "No, it can't wait." Something in his tone finally caught her attention. She turned, her perfectly arched eyebrows rising a fraction of an inch. She perched on the edge of an Italian leather sofa, a piece of furniture that had cost more than the car he drove. She did not sit back. She was poised for flight. He took a slow breath, steeling himself. This was the moment, the precipice. He had played this conversation over in his mind, but now, faced with the reality of it, a profound and weary sadness settled over him. He unfolded the paper, though he didn't need to look at it. "I went to the specialist today," he began, "for the blurriness, the headaches." She waved a dismissive hand. "Eye strain. I told you, you spend too much time hunched over those ridiculous drawings of yours." He ignored the jab. He had been ignoring them for years. "It's not eye strain, Clara. It's a degenerative condition. It's called keratoconus." He paused, letting the unfamiliar word hang in the air between them. The doctor was very clear. The prognosis is, it's not good. "Over the next few years, my vision will progressively deteriorate." He looked her directly in the eyes, his own gaze unwavering. He delivered the payload, the carefully constructed sentence that would change everything. "I'm going blind." The silence that followed was not empty. It was dense, thick with unspoken calculations. He watched her face, a canvas upon which 1,000 fleeting emotions painted themselves and were then wiped away. He saw a flicker of surprise, a shadow of something that might have been pity, but it was gone in an instant. What replaced it, what settled in her eyes and tightened the corners of her perfect mouth, was not concern. It was not fear for him. It was a cold, hard appraisal. It was the look of someone assessing a damaged asset. Before he had even finished the sentence, before the final, devastating word had fully left his lips, he saw her mind already at work. He watched her calculating the cost, the inconvenience, the social liability of a blind husband. He saw the future he represented in her eyes, a burden. She blinked, composing herself with the speed of a seasoned actress. She stood up, walked over to him, and placed a cool, dry hand on his shoulder. The gesture was hollow, a pantomime of affection. "Oh, Ethan, darling, that's terrible news. We'll get through it. Of course we will." Her words were perfect. Her tone was almost convincing, but her eyes betrayed her. They were already distant, looking past him, through him, at a future she was already re-engineering to exclude him. I need a moment, she said, her voice breathy. This is a lot to take in. I'm going to make a call, to my mother. She'll know what to do. She squeezed his shoulder once more, a brittle, meaningless pressure, and then she turned and walked away, pulling her phone from her purse. He didn't move. He sat in the opulent, sterile room and listened. She walked into the kitchen, thinking the distance and the soft hum of the sub-zero refrigerator would muffle her words. But the house was still, and his hearing had always been sharp. "Mother?" Her voice was low, urgent. "Something's happened." "No, I'm fine. It's Ethan. There's a problem with his health. It's serious." A pause. "Look, I can't get into it right now, but I need you to do something for me. Call Philip." Philip was their family's aggressive financial advisor. "I need to know what my options are. About restructuring my portfolio, moving certain assets into a private trust under my name only." "Yes, immediately." Ethan closed his eyes. He had suspected. He had gambled. But the speed of the betrayal, the sheer, breathtaking efficiency of her self-preservation was a physical blow. She hadn't even waited for his sentence to end before she began hiding the money. She hadn't waited for the echo of his pain to fade before she started building a wall to protect herself from it. He thought she couldn't see him, but the truth was she hadn't truly seen him in years. And in her blindness, she had no idea that he could see her with more clarity than ever before. She thought he was a liability she needed to cut loose. She didn't know that she had just lit the fuse on a bomb that would shatter the very foundations of her world. Within 3 months, everything she believed to be solid, everything she held dear, would be turned to dust. It's a terrible thing to watch the person you promised your life to decide that your life is no longer a good investment. It's a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. But what do you do when that happens? Do you crumble, or do you find a strength you never knew you had? We love hearing from you, so tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Your support means the world, so if you enjoy our stories, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more. Now let's see what happens when a man who has been underestimated for far too long decides to open his eyes. Their story had begun, as so many do, with a charming fiction. Ethan was an architect, and Clara was captivated by the romance of it. In the early days of their courtship, she would visit his small, cluttered studio, a space filled with rolls of drafting paper, intricate scale models, and the scent of coffee and sawdust. She saw it as a quaint, artistic affectation. She loved telling her friends, "He's an artist, really. He builds worlds with his hands." She didn't understand that he was, in fact, building worlds, just not the small boutique ones she imagined. Ethan came from a family of builders and engineers. His father was a master carpenter who taught him that the strength of a structure was in its foundation, in the things you couldn't see. His mother, a librarian, taught him that knowledge was a quiet power, most effective when held in reserve. He was raised on principles of integrity, hard work, and humility. These were values that were utterly alien to Clara's family. Her father, Marcus Vance, was a real estate magnate of the old school. He didn't build things, he acquired them. He leveraged, he traded, he collected properties like trophies. His empire was a complex web of holding companies and high-risk investments, a house of cards built on the shifting sands of the market. He viewed Ethan with a thinly veiled disdain, a curiosity reserved for an exotic but ultimately inferior species. Marcus's world was loud, ostentatious, and governed by a single, brutal metric: the bottom line. Clara's brother, Julian, was a paler, weaker echo of his father. He worked for the family company in a vaguely defined executive role, his primary function being to agree with Marcus and amplify his father's opinions. Julian's mockery of Ethan was less sophisticated than his father's, more direct. He saw Ethan's quiet nature as weakness. his focus on sustainable design as a laughable lack of ambition. From the beginning, Ethan was a project for them, a man to be molded. They assumed his modest background meant he was desperate to ascend into their world. They mistook his politeness for deference, his patience for passivity. He let them. In the beginning, he did it for Clara. He loved the woman he thought she was, the one who seemed to see something different in him. He believed his love could insulate her from her family's corrosive values. He hoped that in time, she would choose his world over theirs. He never lied about his work, but he allowed them to draw their own conclusions. When they asked about his firm, he would say, "We're a small team, but we're passionate about what we do." They heard small and stopped listening. They never asked the name of his firm, EOS Architects. They never bothered to look it up. If they had, they would have discovered it was one of the most innovative and disruptive forces in modern architecture. A company that didn't bid on single-family mansions, but competed for city-defining, multi-billion-dollar urban renewal projects across the globe. He let them believe his income was modest. He lived simply. He drove a 10-year-old sedan not because he couldn't afford a new one, but because it was reliable, and he saw no reason to replace it. He and Clara lived in a house he had purchased with his own funds before they were married, but he allowed her to take full credit for its design and decor. He poured his vast earnings into trusts and investments managed by his fiercely loyal partner, Sophia, content to live a life that didn't advertise its own success. This quiet deception was a test, a long-running experiment. Would Clara love the man, or the status he could provide? For a long time, he allowed himself to believe the answer was the former. A memory from 2 years prior often surfaced in his mind. It was a Sunday afternoon barbecue at the Vance estate. The air was thick with the smell of chlorine and grilled meat. Marcus, holding a glass of scotch, had cornered Ethan by the pool. "Clara tells me you're designing a community library," Marcus had said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Very noble. What's the budget on a little project like that? A few $100,000? "Something like that," Ethan had replied calmly, not bothering to correct him that it was a state-of-the-art, multi-million-dollar civic center. Julian had sidled up, smirking. "Don't you ever get tired of playing with blocks, Ethan? When are you going to do some real business? Come work for Dad. We could find a spot for you in property management. You could wear a suit." "I like what I do," Ethan had said, his voice even. "Yes, but what's the point?" Marcus had pressed, gesturing expansively at his own massive house. "This is the point. Legacy. Impact. You're building birdhouses while we're building empires." Ethan had simply nodded, a small, unreadable smile on his face. At that very moment, his phone had buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Sophia. "Kyoto deal closed. They've signed. Congratulations, E. You just became a legend." The Kyoto deal was a 150 billion yen transit hub redesign. An empire. He had silenced the phone and turned his attention back to Marcus, who was now explaining the genius of a recent strip mall acquisition. The dramatic irony was so thick, so potent, it was almost comical. He had held on to that hope for Clara for 8 years. He had endured the endless slights, the casual dismissals, the fundamental lack of respect, all while quietly building a global empire they couldn't even conceive of. He had compartmentalized his life, the humble, slightly disappointing husband at home, and the visionary titan of industry at work. He told himself it was to protect his work from their greed, to keep his passion pure. But he knew, deep down, he was waiting for her to see him, the real him, without the prompting of a balance sheet. The doctor's diagnosis had provided the perfect, terrible catalyst. Keratoconus. It sounded frightening, and it could be, but his case was manageable. A procedure called corneal cross-linking was scheduled, with a success rate of over 99%. His vision would be stabilized. He would not go blind. But the word itself, blindness, was a key. It was a key that could unlock the final door, reveal the true nature of his wife's heart. So he had turned the key. And as he sat in the living room listening to her strategize her financial escape, he finally had his answer. The experiment was over. The results were in. And now the consequences would begin. The weeks that followed the diagnosis were a masterclass in passive aggression and emotional distance. Clara treated Ethan with a kind of brittle, careful solicitude that was more insulting than outright neglect. She would speak to him in a slightly louder voice, as if his hearing were also failing. She would guide him through rooms he had walked through 1,000 times, her hand on his elbow a mark of possession, not support. It was a public performance of the concerned wife, a role she played with chilling precision. Privately, the chill was literal. The warmth had evaporated from their marriage, leaving behind a cold, hard vacuum. She stopped sharing her bed, citing his restless nights and her need for sleep. In reality, she spent her evenings in the guest room, her laptop glowing late into the night as she untangled her life from his. She thought she was being subtle. She wasn't. The campaign of asset liquidation began under the guise of redecoration. "Darling, this furniture is so dated," she announced one afternoon, gesturing at a set of antique rosewood chairs they had bought together on a trip to Vienna. "It's depressing. I'm having it all replaced with something more minimalist." 2 days later, the chairs were gone, and Ethan saw the deposit into her personal account, an account he wasn't supposed to know about. The art on the walls followed, pieces he had personally selected. They were replaced by bland, generic prints. "So much cleaner, don't you think?" she chirped, avoiding his gaze. The true crucible, however, remained her family. A dinner was arranged at her parents' home, a sprawling mansion that always felt more like a corporate headquarters than a place of warmth. Ethan knew what was coming. It was an ambush dressed up as a family meal. He arrived with Clara, who gripped his arm with performative tightness as they walked up the marble steps. Marcus greeted them at the door, his expression a practiced mask of sympathy. "Ethan, good to see you out and about," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Holding up okay?" "I'm managing, Marcus," Ethan replied, his voice neutral. He was carrying his slim leather portfolio, a habit he had adopted recently. It rarely left his side. Julian was hovering nearby, a smirk playing on his lips. "Hey, Ethan, heard the news. Tough break." He leaned in conspiratorially. "I guess this means you'll be doing less reading and more listening? I've got some great audiobooks I can recommend. The Art of the Deal, for starters." "Thank you, Julian. I'll keep that in mind," Ethan said, his calm a stark contrast to Julian's smug energy. They sat down to dinner at a long, polished mahogany table that could have seated 20. The conversation was a carefully orchestrated dance around Ethan's condition. Clara's mother, a woman perpetually draped in pearls and anxiety, kept asking if the lighting was too bright for him. The main assault came with dessert. Marcus leaned back, swirling the brandy in his snifter. "You know, Ethan, I've been thinking about your situation, about your future, and Clara's." He glanced at his daughter, a look of grim solidarity passing between them. "A man needs to have a purpose, and when one door closes, another one opens, as they say. Maybe this setback is an opportunity for you to pursue something less visually demanding." "Oh?" Ethan took a sip of water, his eyes fixed on Marcus. He could feel Clara tense beside him. "Absolutely," Julian chimed in, eager to support his father. "You can't exactly be drawing up blueprints if you can't see the paper, can you? It's a joke, a joke. Lighten up." He laughed, a harsh, braying sound. "But seriously, Dad's right. You need a plan B." "And what would you suggest?" Ethan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Marcus leaned forward, all magnanimous counsel. "We could set you up. A small fund to manage, perhaps. Something you could do from home. It would give you something to occupy your time, keep your mind sharp. And it would ensure Clara is taken care of, that she isn't burdened with being the sole provider." The word hung in the air. Burdened. Clara, who had been silent, finally spoke, but not to defend him. She placed a hand on his, her touch as cold as a marble floor at home. "They're just trying to help, darling. We all are. We have to be realistic." Realistic. It was their code word for cutting him down to a size they could manage, a problem they could solve with money and condescension. Ethan felt a slow, cold anger coalesce in his chest, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he let his fingers rest on the smooth, worn leather of the portfolio sitting in his lap. He thought of the documents inside, the contracts, the site plans for the Meridian project, the detailed schematics for a new city district that would render Marcus Vance's entire real estate portfolio obsolete. The power thrumming within that simple leather case was an invisible force field against their petty cruelties. He looked across the table at Marcus, then at Julian, then at his wife. He saw their faces, so confident in their superiority, so blind to the reality of the man sitting before them. They were judging him on a future that would never happen, based on a weakness he did not possess. He gave them a small, serene smile. "Thank you all for your concern," he said, his voice imbued with a sincerity that was profoundly false. "It means the world to me. I'll certainly give your suggestions some thought. It's a lot to process, as you can imagine." His acquiescence seemed to satisfy them. They mistook his strategic retreat for surrender. The tension in the room eased. Marcus leaned back, triumphant. Julian smirked into his dessert. Clara's hand relaxed on his. They thought they had him. They had successfully framed his future, defined his new, diminished role in their world. As they left that night, Clara's mood was lighter than it had been in weeks. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" she said as they drove. "They love you. They just want to make sure we're secure." "Yes," Ethan said, looking out at the city lights blurring past the window. "Security is everything." She didn't catch the double meaning. She heard only what she wanted to hear. She was secure in her plans. Her family was secure in their status. And they were all secure in the knowledge that Ethan was a problem being managed. They had no idea he was not the storm, but the quiet, unnerving calm that comes before it. The portfolio on the seat beside him felt heavy, a sleeping giant waiting for the command to wake. While Clara was busy dismantling their shared life, Ethan was methodically fortifying his own. His days took on a dual nature. At home, he played the part of the declining man, his movements slightly more hesitant, his reliance on Clara for small things, a carefully calibrated performance. But when he left the house, he would walk 2 blocks to a nondescript coffee shop, slip out the back, and get into the waiting town car that would ferry him to the real center of his world, the downtown offices of EOS Architects. The contrast was jarring. He would leave the cold, silent museum of his home and step into a vibrant hub of creative energy. The offices of EOS were a testament to his design philosophy. Open, flooded with natural light, filled with lush greenery and the quiet hum of brilliant minds at work. Here he was not poor Ethan, the future burden. He was Mr. Thorne, the visionary founder, the man whose opinion was the final word on every multi-million-dollar decision. His partner, Sophia Rossi, was waiting for him in his private office, a glass-walled room with a panoramic view of the city skyline. Sophia was everything Clara was not: sharp, fiercely intelligent, and loyal to the bone. She had been with him since the beginning, when EOS was just 2 desks in a rented room. She knew his mind better than anyone. "How was the dinner party from hell?" she asked without preamble, handing him a cup of black coffee. Ethan sank into a chair, the tension from the previous night still clinging to him. "As expected, they've offered to set me up with a small fund to manage from home, so I don't burden Clara." Sophia's expression darkened. She was a fiery Italian-American woman who did not suffer fools, and she had despised Clara's family from the moment she met them. "The arrogance of those people, to offer you pocket money. Do they have any idea that your small fund could probably buy their entire pathetic company 3 times over and still have enough left for a private island?" No, Ethan said with a grim smile. They don't. And that is the point. He gestured to the leather portfolio he'd placed on the table. She's getting more brazen, selling assets, moving funds. I need our legal team to track every transaction. I want a complete, documented record of her financial preparations for her exit. Already on it, Sophia said, tapping her tablet. We have a forensic accountant monitoring everything. She's moving money into a trust under her maiden name. The paperwork was filed last week. She's not just hiding it, she's walling it off. Ethan nodded slowly. Good. Let her build her little fortress. She thinks she's building a lifeboat. She doesn't realize she's building her own cage. Then they turned to the real work. Spread across the large conference table were the final plans for the Meridian project. It was the culmination of 5 years of secret negotiations, design, and planning. It wasn't just a building, it was an entire district. A revolutionary, self-sustaining urban village in a derelict industrial zone on the city's south side. It incorporated cutting-edge green technology, residential towers, commercial spaces, public parks, and a new light rail transit hub. It was a project that would not only generate billions in revenue, but would fundamentally alter the economic and social landscape of the city. The final city council vote is in 3 weeks, Sophia said, pointing to a date on the calendar. It's a formality. We have the votes. The announcement will be made the following day. Ethan looked at the scale model in the center of the table. It was a city in miniature, his city. And Marcus Vance? Sophia pulled up another file on the main screen. It was a corporate chart for Vance Properties. His entire portfolio is over-leveraged in the South District. For the past 2 years, he's been buying up those old warehouses and commercial lots, betting on a traditional industrial revitalization. He thinks he's cornered the market. He thinks we're building birdhouses, Ethan murmured, recalling his father-in-law's insult. He's about to find out you build eagles' nests, Sophia retorted. When we announce Meridian, the city will enact eminent domain to acquire all that land. The price they'll pay will be based on current, pre-revitalization valuations. He'll be wiped out. He paid a premium for land that's about to be bought from him for pennies on the dollar. It was a brutal, elegant strategy, poetic justice on a corporate scale. Ethan felt a grim satisfaction, but it was tempered by a lingering sadness. This was the life he could have shared with Clara. This success, this vision. He had wanted to build it with her, for her, but she had chosen to see only the facade. And your procedure? Sophia asked, her voice softening. Next Tuesday, Ethan confirmed. Corneal cross-linking. It's outpatient. I'll need to wear a patch for a day and take it easy for a week. Full recovery. My vision will be stable. It will be fine. Ethan, she said, her dark eyes searching his. Are you sure about this? This whole charade? It's a dangerous game. He looked out the window at the city sprawling below them. It's not a game. It's a diagnosis. Not of my eyes, but of my life. I needed to see things clearly, Sophia. I needed to know once and for all if I was married to a partner or a shareholder. A shareholder cuts their losses when an asset underperforms. He paused, his voice dropping. I have my answer. Now I'm just managing the dissolution of the partnership. He spent the rest of the day immersed in the final details of the Meridian project, the world of concrete, steel, and light where he was king. He approved material requisitions worth millions with a simple signature. He solved a complex engineering problem with a few strokes of his pen on a blueprint. He was decisive, powerful, and completely in his element. That evening he returned home. He parked the nondescript town car 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the way, reassuming the posture of the man he was pretending to be. He walked into the house, and the energy, the power, the authority he commanded at Eos, all of it was shed at the door like a coat. Clara was in the kitchen, on the phone. She saw him, and her voice immediately changed, becoming saccharine. Oh, darling, my mother was just asking about you. She ended the call quickly. "How was your day? Did you get some rest?" "It was quiet," he said, and it was the truest lie he had ever told, the quiet before the storm. He looked at her, so busy building her little walls, so blind to the tidal wave that was about to crash down upon her. And for the first time he felt not anger, not sadness, but a profound and chilling sense of pity. The day of Marcus Vance's 60th birthday party arrived cloaked in a deceptive calm. It was a perfect early autumn evening, the air crisp and clear. Clara had been planning the event for months. It was to be the social event of the season, a grand celebration of her father's legacy and influence. For Clara, it was also a swan song, a final performance as Mrs. Ethan Thorne before she gracefully exited the stage of their marriage. She moved through the house with a feverish, brittle energy, directing caterers, florists, and musicians, a general marshaling her troops for a final, glorious parade. Ethan watched her, a silent observer in his own home. He had his procedure 2 weeks prior. The recovery was swift and total. The world had come back into sharp, brilliant focus, the colors richer, the edges crisper than they had been in years. The irony was not lost on him. As his physical vision cleared, so too did his metaphorical sight. He saw everything now. He saw the way Clara's friends looked at him, their eyes full of a pity that was laced with contempt. He was the pitiable, soon-to-be discarded husband. He heard the whispers when he passed, fragments of conversation about his condition and Clara's saintly patience. He saw the triumphant gleam in Marcus Vance's eyes, the look of a man who believed he had successfully managed a family problem. That evening, as guests began to arrive, Ethan dressed in a simple, perfectly tailored dark suit. He looked at himself in the mirror. The man looking back was not the diminished, hesitant figure he had been performing. He was calm, centered, and possessed a quiet intensity that was almost unsettling. Tonight, the performance would end. He moved through the party like a ghost. The house was alive with music, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. He nodded to people he knew, accepted their sympathetic pleasantries with a polite smile, and kept moving. He was a rock in the middle of a chattering stream, impassive and immovable. His leather portfolio was not with him tonight. It was in his study. He wouldn't need it just yet. He found Marcus holding court by the grand piano, a circle of sycophantic business associates hanging on his every word. Marcus spotted him and waved him over, a gesture of magnanimous inclusion. "Ethan, there you are," Marcus boomed, slinging a heavy arm around his shoulders. "We were just talking about the future of the South District. Big things are happening. Big things." He winked at the other men. "You have to have vision in our business, right?" The men chuckled knowingly. The cruelty of the pun was deliberate, a power play disguised as a joke. Ethan didn't flinch. He simply met Marcus's gaze. "Vision is essential, Marcus, but you have to make sure you're looking at the whole picture." Marcus's smile faltered for a second, thrown by the quiet confidence in Ethan's reply. He quickly recovered, patting him on the back. "That's the spirit. But don't you worry about all that. You just focus on yourself. We'll take care of the rest. That's what family is for." He then turned to Clara, who had just glided over. "Your husband has a good attitude, my dear, but you need to be prepared. When the time comes, you mustn't let him be a drain on your future. You have to be strong." It was a stunningly cruel statement, delivered as fatherly advice. It was permission. It was an order. Clara smiled, a tight, dutiful expression. "I know, Daddy. Don't worry." Ethan felt the last vestiges of his old affection for her turn to ice. It was a clean, sharp break. He gently extricated himself from Marcus's grip. "If you'll excuse me," he said, his voice level, "I need to get some air." He walked out onto the terrace. The cool night air felt good on his face. He looked up at the stars, pinpricks of distant, burning light. He thought about the intricate dance of gravity and time that kept them in their orbits. The universe had its own inexorable laws. So did the world of cause and effect. Tonight, The Vances were about to have a lesson in physics. Sophia was going to make the announcement about the Meridian project tomorrow morning. The trap was set. All the pieces were in place. All he had to do was spring it. He went back inside. The party was reaching its crescendo. It was time for the speeches. Julian went first, delivering a fawning, rambling tribute to his father. Then Clara took the floor. She spoke eloquently about Marcus's strength and vision, her voice catching with emotion at all the right moments. It was a masterful performance. Finally, Marcus himself stood, glass in hand, beaming at the adoring crowd. He thanked everyone for coming. He praised his family, his business, his life. And then his eyes found Ethan in the crowd. "I want to propose a toast," Marcus said, his voice resonating with false sincerity. "To resilience, to facing adversity with courage. Life throws us curveballs. It presents us with hurdles. But a strong family, a strong foundation, can overcome anything." He raised his glass higher, looking directly at Ethan. "To overcoming life's little hurdles." The crowd murmured its approval and drank. They thought it was a touching tribute. Ethan knew it was a final, public dismissal, a toast to his own obsolescence. The applause died down. The band was about to start up again. The moment was now. Ethan took a step forward. "If I may," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the residual chatter with the clarity of a ringing bell. Every head turned towards him. The room fell silent. Clara's face was a mask of panic. She shot him a furious look. "Ethan, not now," she hissed, moving towards him. "Just for a moment, Clara," he said, holding up a hand. He didn't look at her. His gaze was fixed on Marcus. He walked slowly to the center of the room, his calm presence commanding the space. He had no microphone, no glass to raise, but he had the full, undivided attention of every person there. "I'd like to thank my father-in-law for his toast," Ethan began, his voice even and measured. "And I'd like to thank all of you, really, for the tremendous concern you've shown me and my family over these past few months." He let that hang in the air. The sincerity in his tone was disarming. People smiled, nodding. Clara looked confused, her initial panic giving way to suspicion. "It's been an educational period for me," Ethan continued, his eyes sweeping the room before landing back on Marcus and Clara. "A time of great clarity. You see, when a man is faced with a crisis, he learns a great deal. He learns about his own strength. And more importantly, he learns about the people around him." The atmosphere in the room began to shift. The polite smiles were fading, replaced by looks of intense curiosity. This was not the speech of a broken man. This was something else entirely. The quiet before the storm was over. The first drops of rain had begun to fall. Ethan's voice remained calm, but it took on a new edge, a blade being slowly unsheathed. "Marcus, you spoke of vision, and you're right. It is the most important thing a man can have." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Which is why I'm so pleased to announce that after a minor, successful, and fully restorative procedure 2 weeks ago, my vision is, and will remain, perfectly 20/20. A collective gasp rippled through the room. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the space. He watched Clara's face. The color drained from it. Her mouth opened slightly, a perfect O of disbelief. Marcus froze, his glass halfway to his lips, his jovial mask cracking. "I'm not going blind," Ethan stated, the words simple, devastating, and final. "I never was. The condition was treatable from the very beginning, but I felt it was important to see who would stand with me in the darkness and who would simply see it as an opportunity." His gaze fell upon his wife. She looked as if he had physically struck her. "Ethan," she whispered, the sound lost in the tomb-like silence of the room. "You see, Clara, I needed to understand the true nature of our partnership," he continued, his voice softening into a tone of chilling intimacy, though he spoke for all to hear. "I presented a liability, and you, being the excellent financial manager you are, immediately began to mitigate your exposure. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out not a grand architectural model, but a slim stack of papers held by a single clip. It was the report from the forensic accountant. You began by moving $80,000 from the sale of the Vienna chairs into a private trust. Account number 748B filed under your maiden name. Then came the proceeds from the art, another $150,000, followed by systematic transfers from our joint savings, totaling just over $500,000 over the last 10 weeks. He didn't raise his voice. He simply read the facts, each one a hammer blow against the facade of their life. You were very thorough, very efficient. Clara was shaking her head, her eyes wide with frantic denial, but no words came out. She looked to her father for help, but Marcus was staring at Ethan, his face a mottled canvas of fury and dawning horror. "But this," Ethan said, his voice losing its softness and gaining a hard, steel-like quality. "This was all just a prelude, a symptom of a deeper blindness." He turned his full attention to Marcus. "You toasted to overcoming hurdles, Marcus. You built an empire on your supposed ability to see what's coming, but your vision is fatally flawed. You only see the value of things, never their worth." Ethan took a step toward his father-in-law. "For 2 years, you've been sinking every dollar of your over-leveraged capital into the South District, buying up derelict properties, betting on an industrial boom. You thought you were a genius, cornering the market." He paused, letting the tension build to an unbearable peak. "Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the city will announce the approval of the Meridian project. It's a full-scale urban redevelopment, green residential towers, commercial centers, a new transit hub. My project, my firm's project." He let that sink in. The name of his firm, EOS Architects, was unspoken but suddenly understood by the few in the room who mattered. The whispers started, a wildfire of realization spreading through the crowd. "The Meridian project requires the acquisition of the entire South District under the laws of eminent domain," Ethan stated, his voice now devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of pure, unassailable fact. "The city will purchase your properties, Marcus. They will pay you fair market value based on their current, derelict state, not the inflated premium you paid for them. Your entire investment, your company, your empire, as you call it, will be rendered worthless by lunchtime tomorrow." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a world ending. Marcus Vance, the titan, the magnate, looked like a man who had been hollowed out. His face was ashen. The brandy snifter slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor, the sound unnervingly loud in the stillness. Julian was gaping, looking from Ethan to his father, the simple arithmetic of ruin slowly adding up in his mind. And Clara. She stood frozen in the center of it all, the architect of her own demise. She had traded a king for a pawn, never realizing the man she was casting off as a liability held the power to destroy the very world she prized above all else. The party was over. The beautiful, curated life had been revealed as a cheap stage set, and the final act was about to be devastating. The immediate aftermath was not chaos. It was something quieter, more chilling. The vibrant energy of the party evaporated, leaving a vacuum of stunned silence. Guests, who moments before were laughing and drinking, now stood in awkward, silent clusters, their eyes darting between Ethan, the pale, shattered figure of Marcus Vance, and the frozen statue that was Clara. They began to slip away, one by one, mumbling excuses, desperate to escape the toxic fallout of a life so publicly detonated. They didn't want to be associated with the ruin. Clara was the first to move. The shock that had paralyzed her gave way to a desperate, frantic energy. She rushed towards Ethan, her hands outstretched, her face a pleading, tear-streaked mask. The cold, calculating woman was gone, replaced by a performer playing her last, most desperate role, the repentant wife. "Ethan, darling, listen to me," she cried, her voice ragged. She tried to take his arm, to re-establish the physical connection that had once meant something. I didn't, I didn't understand. You kept so much from me. If I had known, we can fix this. I can fix this. Ethan took a calm step back, avoiding her touch. The space he created between them was a chasm. He looked at her, his expression not of anger, but of profound, final disappointment. "No, Clara," he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the cavernous room. "You can't fix this, because you still don't understand. The problem wasn't that you didn't know about the money. The problem is what you did when you thought there was none." He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw a stranger. "You aren't sorry for the betrayal. You're sorry you betrayed the wrong man." Her face crumpled. The truth of his words was undeniable, a mirror she could not avoid. At that precise, perfectly timed moment, the front door opened. Sophia Rossi entered, her presence a beacon of calm, professional authority. She was dressed in a sharp business suit and was followed by a man in a courier's uniform. She walked directly to Ethan, ignoring everyone else in the room. Her timing was, as always, impeccable. "The final papers are ready for signature, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice crisp. She then turned her gaze, cold and sharp, onto Clara. "Mrs. Thorne." She didn't offer a greeting, just a cool acknowledgement. She handed a thick manila envelope to the courier, who then stepped forward and presented it to Clara. "Clara Thorne?" the courier asked formally. Clara stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. She didn't take it. "You've been served," the courier said flatly, placing the envelope on a nearby table before turning and leaving as quietly as he had arrived. "Divorce papers, the final legal severance." "Ethan, no," Clara whispered, her voice cracking. "You can't. After everything." "It's already done," Ethan said. He turned to Sophia. "Is everything in place?" "Everything," she confirmed. "The house is listed as an asset of the Meridian Trust, established 5 years ago. It will be put on the market Monday morning. All joint accounts have been frozen, pending the dissolution. Mrs. Thorne's personal accounts, containing the assets she transferred, are of course untouched. She has what she chose." Clara looked around the room, at the opulent splendor she had curated, and for the first time, she saw it for what it was. Someone else's property. A stage she was being kicked off of. Meanwhile, Marcus had finally found his voice. It was a hoarse, strangled sound. You boy," he sputtered, stumbling towards Ethan, his face contorted with rage. "You did this to me, to my family. You planned this." "I planned a building project, Marcus," Ethan replied, his calm infuriating. "I planned for my future. You are just a casualty of your own greed. You made a bad bet. The house always wins." "I'll ruin you," Marcus roared, his voice cracking. "I still have friends in this city. I'll sue you into oblivion." Sophia stepped forward, placing herself between Ethan and Marcus. "I wouldn't advise that," she said, her voice like ice. "Our legal team has compiled a rather comprehensive dossier on Vance Properties' business practices over the last decade. Leveraged acquisitions, questionable zoning variances, insider trading. I'm sure the SEC would find it fascinating reading. You sue us and that file becomes public record. Your friends in the city will run from you like you're on fire." Marcus stopped dead. The threat was clear, precise, and utterly devastating. He was checkmated. The fight went out of him, replaced by a look of utter desolation. He was a king whose kingdom had just vanished in a puff of smoke. He staggered back, leaning on the piano for support, a broken man. Julian, who had been watching the entire exchange with the wide, terrified eyes of a child watching gods at war, finally acted. He rushed to his father's side, not with defiance, but with a new, unfamiliar flicker of concern. Ethan watched them for a moment longer. Clara, standing alone amidst the wreckage of her life. Marcus staring into the abyss of his own ruin. Julian, for the first time, looking like a son instead of a sycophant. He had won. The reversal was total and absolute. Those who had humiliated him were now humbled. Those who had dismissed him now saw his power. But he felt no triumph, only a vast, empty sense of release. He turned to leave. "Ethan, wait," Clara called out, a last desperate plea. He paused at the doorway but didn't turn back. "Goodbye, Clara," he said, and then he walked out into the cool night air, leaving the ruins of his old life behind him without a single backward glance. The storm had passed, and the silence it left behind was the sound of his own freedom. The weeks that followed the party were a slow, grinding descent for the Vance family. The world they had built, a world predicated on status, reputation, and the illusion of unassailable wealth, crumbled with astonishing speed. The news of the Meridian Project dominated the city's financial pages. EOS Architects and its visionary founder, Ethan Thorne, were lauded as saviors of the city's future. The name Vance, in contrast, became synonymous with epic failure, a cautionary tale whispered at country clubs and in boardrooms. Clara's fall was the most immediate and visceral. The day after the party, she woke up not in her grand house, but in the guest room of her parents' mansion, the same mansion where she had once been a princess. The locks on her marital home had been changed. The keys in her purse were useless pieces of metal. Her credit cards, tied to joint accounts Ethan had frozen, were declined one by one. The shame was a constant, public humiliation. The first time was at a high-end boutique where she was a favored customer. The second, at a cafe trying to buy a simple cup of coffee. The pitying looks from salespeople and baristas were 1,000 tiny cuts. She was adrift. The friends who had flocked to her parties now avoided her calls. She was no longer a connector. She was a contagion. Her life, once a whirlwind of social engagements and leisurely lunches, shrank to the four walls of her childhood bedroom. The money she had so carefully siphoned away, which had seemed like a fortune, was now her entire world. It was a safety net, but one that was shrinking every day, a constant reminder of the empire she had traded for a pittance. She and her father fell into a pattern of bitter recriminations. The grand Vance mansion, once a symbol of power, became a pressure cooker of resentment. "This is your fault," Marcus would roar, his face florid, a glass of whiskey perpetually in his hand. "You married him. You brought this viper into our house." "My fault?" Clara would scream back, her voice raw. "You're the one who taught me that money was everything. You're the one who mocked him, who called him weak. You never saw him, and you taught me to be just as blind." Their arguments were ugly, circular, and pointless. They were two people trapped in the rubble of their own making, each blaming the other for the collapse. Marcus's professional life was a slow-motion demolition. As Ethan had predicted, Vance Properties was forced to sell its South District holdings to the city for a fraction of their purchase price. The losses were catastrophic. To cover the debts, Marcus had to start selling off his trophy assets, the ski lodge in Aspen, the penthouse in Miami, the yacht. Each sale was a public admission of defeat. His friends in the city, the ones he was so sure would stand by him, vanished. They were businessmen, and Marcus Vance was no longer good for business. He spent his days in his home office, making frantic, useless calls, a king with no subjects and no kingdom. Amidst the wreckage, one person made a different choice. Julian, the weak, smirking echo of his father, began to change. Witnessing the totality of his family's collapse, seeing the man he had mocked rise to become the most powerful force in the city, had shaken him to his core. The foundation of his world had been a lie, and the realization forced him, for the first time in his life, to think for himself. One afternoon, 3 weeks after the party, Julian did something unimaginable. He drove to the gleaming new downtown tower that housed the main offices of EOS Architects. He didn't have an appointment. He sat in the lobby for 2 hours, a place filled with ambitious young architects and engineers who buzzed with energy, until finally Ethan's assistant took pity on him. He was shown into Ethan's office. It was a space that radiated quiet power and breathtaking vision, with a view that seemed to encompass the entire world. Ethan was standing by the window, looking down at the city. He turned as Julian entered, his expression unreadable. Julian faltered. In this context, with Ethan so clearly in his element, the power imbalance was overwhelming. He suddenly felt small, foolish, a boy in a man's world. "Ethan, Mr. Thorne," he began, his voice barely a whisper. I don't want anything." Ethan waited, his silence an invitation to continue. "I came to apologize," Julian said, the words clumsy, unfamiliar in his mouth. "For everything, for how I treated you, for the things I said, the jokes." He looked down at his hands. "I was an idiot. I was arrogant. I was weak. I just followed my father's lead. I never had an original thought of my own. I thought you were nothing because you weren't loud like us, because you weren't shiny." He looked up, and for the first time, Ethan saw not a caricature, but a man in genuine pain. "What you did," Julian shook his head, a look of grudging awe on his face. "It was brutal, but it was honest. You showed us exactly who we were, and I didn't like what I saw." He took a shaky breath. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see you, and I'm sorry." Ethan studied him for a long moment. He saw the truth in Julian's eyes. The apology was not a strategy. It was a genuine act of contrition, the first step on a long, hard road. "Thank you for coming, Julian," Ethan said finally. His voice was not warm, but it was not cold either. It was neutral, accepting. He didn't offer forgiveness. He didn't offer a handshake, but he did offer a sliver of respect. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong." He turned back to the window. It was a dismissal, but a gentle one. Julian understood. He nodded, turned, and left the office. As he walked out of the gleaming tower and back into the sunlight, he felt as though a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He had no job, no prospects, and his family was in ruins. But for the first time in his life, he felt like his own man. He had made a choice, not of loyalty, but of integrity. And in the silent world of consequence, that choice mattered. 6 months passed. The seasons turned. The city, ever indifferent to the personal dramas of its inhabitants, continued its relentless hum. But for Ethan Thorne, the city was no longer just a backdrop. It was his canvas. From his new office, a minimalist space on the top floor of a building he himself had designed, he had a direct view of the South District. What was once a wasteland of crumbling brick and rusted steel was now a forest of cranes and rising girders. The Meridian Project was taking shape, a testament to a vision that had refused to be dimmed. Every morning he would stand at the floor-to-ceiling window with his first cup of coffee and watch his dream being forged in concrete and glass. His vision, both literal and metaphorical, was sharper and clearer than ever before. The world was a place of crystalline detail. He rarely thought of Clara or her family anymore. They were figures from a past life, ghosts in a story that had reached its conclusion. He had heard through the grapevine that Marcus had finally been forced to sell the family mansion and had retired to a small condo in Florida, a bitter, diminished man. Clara, after burning through most of her escape fund, had taken a job as an assistant at an art gallery. She was, for the first time, earning her own living, a harsh lesson in the value of a dollar she had never had to learn. One day, a letter arrived at his office. It was from Julian. It wasn't a plea for help or another apology. It was a short, simple note. He had moved to another state and taken an entry-level job with a construction company. "I'm starting from the foundation," he wrote, "learning how things are actually built. Thank you for the lesson." Ethan read the note, a small, thoughtful smile on his face, and then put it away. Redemption, he mused, was a quiet, solitary process. It couldn't be given, it had to be built, one honest day's work at a time. His own life had found a new, more authentic rhythm. He worked, but not with the obsessive drive he once had. He took time to travel, to read, to simply sit and think. The vast fortune he had amassed was no longer a secret weapon, but a tool. He established a foundation that provided scholarships for underprivileged students in architecture and engineering, a quiet tribute to his own humble beginnings. Sophia remained his indispensable partner, their friendship deepened by the trial they had weathered together. "You're different," she told him one afternoon as they reviewed a new set of plans. "You're lighter." He knew she was right. The weight of his double life, of his long, painful experiment, was gone. The brutal surgery he had performed on his life had been a success. He had cut out the diseased tissue, and in its place, new, healthier growth was emerging. The pain of Clara's betrayal had been immense, a wound that had cut to the very core of him. But wounds, when they heal, leave scars. And scars are a reminder of survival. They are a map of where you have been. His scars had taught him a lesson he would never forget. He learned that true worth is not measured in stock portfolios or square footage, but in integrity, loyalty, and the quiet courage to stand by someone in their darkest hour. He learned that respect cannot be demanded or bought. It must be earned through character and action. He learned that hidden strength is infinitely more powerful than the loud, showy dominance of the arrogant. The Vances had believed their power was in their wealth and status. They never understood that real power was in the vision to create, the patience to build, and the integrity to see it through. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across his office, Ethan looked down at the city he was helping to reshape. He was not a vengeful man. He had not sought to destroy the Vances. He had simply refused to be destroyed by them. He had held up a mirror, and they had shattered against their own reflection. He had maintained his moral high ground, not by rising above them in cruelty, but by refusing to sink to their level. His vindication was not in their ruin, but in his own quiet, peaceful success. He was free. The experience had been a fire, but it had not consumed him. It had forged him. It had burned away the illusions, the false hopes, the compromises he had made for a love that was never real. And in the ashes he had found himself, clearer, stronger, and with a vision for the future that was boundless. He was an architect after all, and he was finally building a life whose foundation was sound. It's a powerful thing to realize your own worth, isn't it? Ethan's story is a reminder that the most important vision is seeing people for who they truly are, not who we wish them to be. What do you think is the most important quality in a partner? Loyalty? Honesty? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found this story meaningful, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We have many more stories to share with you. Until next time, remember to build your life on a foundation of truth.